Before we move on, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell so that you can be notified every time I put up a new video. And if you'd like, and you find this content worthwhile, please give it a thumbs up. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Prophecy in Real Time. Today we're going to follow up on what we discussed in the last video about the beast that was wounded in the head and did live, and why this information is absolutely vital. Literally will determine whether or not we go to heaven. We have to understand which is the seventh kingdom so that we won't worship it and make the mistake of worshiping this kingdom. God always gives a key when he does revelation, and we'll be repeating just a little bit, but it's only so we can go more in depth. We know that beast then is referring to a kingdom, not a person. It's a kingdom. The heads of the beast are repeat iterations. They're a do-over. They're kind of like Groundhog Day. If you've watched that movie, I digress. The Roman Empire, we know, was the sixth head of the beast. Babylon was the antithesis to the house of Israel. That is where God had his kingdom on earth, where he shared his information and revelations and blessings to the world through the house of Israel. Satan set up the Babylonian kingdoms to fight against God. So all of these ancient Babylonian kingdoms, and even modern day, are rooted in ancient Baal worship. And Baal was an idol that, the Old Testament times, the house of Israel was always getting in trouble for worshiping idols, because God said, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Elijah, remember in the Old Testament, was discussing with the people whether or not Baal was a real god or just made of stone. And he said to all these prophets of Baal, right, you guys build an altar and put wood on there, and you pray all day if you want, and you see if you can get Baal to send fire down from heaven and light that wood on that altar. So for the altar that he built to God, right, he loaded it up with wood, and then he had him pour water all over it so it'd be really hard to ignite. And after the prophets of Baal had spent all day praying, they couldn't get anything to happen. He just prayed, and God sent immediately a pillar of fire, right, lit that whole thing up. And that was to prove to the people that God is a God of power, that he's real. Now, there's a pattern through which we can tell which of these heads is which kingdom, and up until you get to the seventh kingdom, scholars pretty well are in 100% agreement on that. We know that the pattern is this: they all occupy the land of Canaan, or modern-day Israel. They seek for world domination. Each of these kingdoms, the iteration of these Babylonian kingdoms, they force their religion. So it's basically a state religion. You must worship their gods, right? They practice a form of religious human sacrifice. The kingdom is an antichrist kingdom. There's religious idol worship, and most importantly, they conquer the kingdom before, so we can always know which is the next kingdom. So God gave this land of modern-day Israel, Palestine, or Canaan, as it was known in the Bible, to his people, right, to the house of Israel forever. That's their land. But Satan, that's why it's so much fighting in the Middle East over this land, because Satan wants to take it, because God gave it to his people. Now, the first kingdom of the Babylonian kingdoms, the beast that we find in the book of Revelation, was the Egyptian empire. I've got the phoenix up in the top, and this guy with the funny hat, this statue of Baal, and then I've got a crescent over here on the left. And there's many correlations, but these are just a few that I put on here, so you can see that each successive kingdom not only is the same religion, they change the names and repeat everything the same. The symbols are the same, the religion is the same, etc., etc. The kingdom that conquered the Egyptian empire was the Assyrian Empire. Again, they occupied the land of Canaan, modern-day Israel. They had the crescent you see over the left, their version of the phoenix, a little bit weird up in the right, but that is the phoenix. And again, with the their god with the funny hat. I picked that one because I thought it, well, I just thought it was kind of funny. I digress. Okay, so here we have the Babylonian Empire, which conquered the Assyrian Empire. Again, the pattern holds, and you can see the pictures of the various gods, and everything is the same. And they occupied the land of Canaan. In every case, they must occupy that land, and they must conquer the kingdom before. And this is how we can come to know, by the time we get to the next kingdom here, the Medo-Persian Empire conquered the Babylonian Empire. And again, you can see up here, if you really look close, you can see that this guy has a bit of the funny hat in this tiny picture, but it's under the phoenix here. And right on the left you see a coin with the crescent, and that's because these symbols are satanic symbols, and they are representative of this ancient Baal worship. Right, the Greek Empire then conquered the Medo-Persian Empire. You can see with this Greek coin on the left, you see the crescent and the one of their deities with the funny hat, and the up in here a coin there that's got a phoenix bird on it. The phoenix is actually a symbol of Satan, which is why I have it at the very beginning of this video by the title there. So the Roman Empire conquered the Greek Empire and, of course, occupied the land of current-day Israel. You can see the crescent on the coins there, and everything that here. We know that the Roman Empire split into two. So the Byzantine Empire in the yellow is the one that was conquered next. And John the Revelator, though, was told that they were on the sixth kingdom. Said 5 have fallen, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come. So the 7th one is the one that was wounded in the head and did live. And this is the one we need to vitally understand, because this is the kingdom that the Antichrist comes from, and the one we absolutely cannot worship. It's really apparently going to be kind of hard to understand some of these things and know not to do that. Up when you get to the 7th kingdom, then you get arguments, right? Everybody's agreed up to the first 6. The 7th kingdom, the one that matters so much, people usually one of these two. They say that it was either Rome or it's going to be US and Britain. Rome, because they recognize the similarities. Obviously, the Roman Catholic Church is just an extension of the Roman Empire, so they recognize what they're seeing is the pattern from the 6th head of the beast, though not the 7th. And Rome didn't conquer itself, right? The Catholic Church did not conquer the Roman Empire, and they don't fit the pattern at all, right? The United States and Britain have some similarities, and that's because they're related to the 8th beast, which we'll talk about in another video. But the 7th beast is the one that we so need to recognize. The Ottoman Empire, aka Islam, was the 7th kingdom. It conquered the Roman Empire, it conquered the Byzantine Empire, which was the half of the Roman Empire. And it occupied Israel. Ottoman Empire was in power for 1400 years before it was wounded in the First World War. It resurged under the name of Muslim Brotherhood. But if you can Google it or look in any encyclopedia, you'll find that Ottoman Empire is Islam, that they're interchangeable, they're the same thing. So let's see on a checklist which kingdom, since the argument is between the United States and Britain, or Rome, right, the Roman Catholic Church, or Islam. Let's look at the checklist. So here we have a checklist. We're going to see if it follows the pattern. In each of these, does it fit the US, UK, the Pope, or Islam? Now, the Pope, right, the Roman Empire did fit all of them, but the current continuation of the Holy Roman Empire, right, in the Catholic Church does not now, it doesn't fulfill all of them. You see the occupying of the land of Israel, that's why we have this fight between the Palestinians, right, and the Israelis. That's all about occupying this land. It is Islam that's occupied it. They're the ones that took over for 1400 years before the First World War. Right? They are the ones that have fought over it. The United States has never had that land. We've never owned it. We've never occupied it. Right? The British did have some claim in it for what they never occupied it, though. Right? The Islam is seeking for world domination. You can see that the U.S., UK, right, the Pope, they don't fit these. The practice of religious human sacrifice in the form of beheadings definitely fits in Islam. It's an antichrist religion. They worship religious idols in the form of the black stone and stuff, right? The Catholics I put there because they do pray to statues and whatnot, which is actually, but the only one that conquered the kingdom before was Islam, and you see that the Pope didn't conquer the Roman Empire because he is part of the Roman Empire. So the Pope, the reason, and people are accurate in seeing similarities because it is the sixth head and it's going to have the same pattern, but it is not the seventh. The sixth kingdom did not conquer the seventh kingdom, right? The seventh kingdom did not conquer itself, right? The sixth kingdom didn't conquer itself. The seventh kingdom, but you see people refer to, well, it says Mystery Babylon, wearing of scarlet and purple, right? This picture isn't really purple and scarlet, but they do often wear purple and scarlet. But the Islamic caliphs also, like the popes, right, or in the ancient days, right, the emperor of the Roman Empire, the Pope is fulfilling that role, but both, it could be said of both. So it's important to distinguish the difference between the sixth and the seventh head. By the similarities you can tell. People will argue, well, it says that this the horror sits on 7 hills. No, it sits on 7 mountains, and mountains are kingdoms, but Rome is the city that sits on 7 hills. But by that same argument, if it were referring to that, which it's not, but Mecca also sits on 7 hills. That's the center of Islamic, well, it's like their Rome, okay? So the other thing is the book of Daniel talks about the Antichrist. It says the people of the prince who shall come, referring to the destruction of the second temple, that the Antichrist will come from that. Of course, everybody knows it was the Romans that destroyed the second temple, which is another reason for thinking that it's the Pope. But according to Josephus, who was one of the most famous, or probably the most famous Jewish historian, that's not exactly accurate. See, the Romans had hired mercenaries that were helping them in controlling the land of Judea, and they actually, right, the Arabs, they had Arab mercenaries that hated the Jews so much. They actually are the ones that set the temple on fire, and the garrison leader of the Roman Empire actually tried to stop it. That's according to Josephus. So it was the people of the prince who shall come, actually was the Arabs who destroyed then the second temple, or Islam, right? So the Antichrist is specified to come from that. There is more evidence, but you see that there's a funny hat, right? Not to mock anybody, but I have to mock the hat. It's just really not, well, it's not Vogue, right? But you can see the Islamic symbols and the shapes of the architecture and everything is so much the same that you can see why the confusion, right? You got the sixth and the seventh head. They're going to be so similar as to be very confusing. But we can absolutely know because in the book of Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel was told what nations would be included in this beast kingdom in the last days. Exactly what kingdoms would be involved, and we know where those were in modern terms. This in the black here are the countries specifically listed in the book of Ezekiel for being in that beast. And you notice that Italy is not on the list, neither is the United States, right? These countries are all part of that OIC. Ezekiel specifically listed, right, he didn't call it Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, right, and parts of Afghanistan. That was the ancient location of the place called Magog. and that it comes into play in future history, what I like to call future history. Iran is Persia, Sudan was called Kush, then there's Libya, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia were Put, central Turkey, Gomer, and southeastern Turkey, Togarma, right? So you've got all of these kingdoms very specifically listed where the Antichrist is supposed to come from. Again, Italy is not on the list, and neither is the United States, right? Also John the Revelator, everybody's heard of 666 in this connection. John the Revelator he said, I saw the number of his name. The number of his name. And here you can see the Greek number that's translated as 666. And above that, on the left here, you see in Arabic the name of Allah. You see that they're exactly the same, right? And Allah is the God of Islam. You can see over here the actual biblical text next to an Islamic coin that's got the symbols on there of Allah. So who is Allah, right? Number one, Allah was one of the statues, one of the ancient false gods of the Babylonian kingdoms, right? That actually was the name of one of their gods, Allah. Number two, I put down there Satan, right? Because I believe that Allah is Satan, not just an idol in this case. Now, when Moses went up into the mountain where he got the 10 Commandments, he saw God, right? And he got the 10 Commandments. And Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, right? He went up into a mountain. It's a very similar story, except for he thought he saw a demon, right? He said he saw a demon. It scared him so bad he nearly jumped off the edge of the cliff there to kill himself to get away from this demon. But he was held down and even strangled to the point forced to submit till he would dictate what he was told by Allah, right? And that's how the Quran came to be. It's a dictation, I believe, dictation of Satan's Bible in essence. So that the root of Islam is definitely and undeniably ancient Baal worship, and again with the Catholicism, you'll see all these same things because it's the sixth kingdom. It's gonna overlap. So next time somebody wants to argue with you on which is which, tell them, right, that is the sixth head, right? It is one of these heads of the beast. It's just not the one that everybody's going to be forced to worship, right? The Italians aren't beheading anybody, and neither is the United States, for that matter. But then people say, well, the Muslims believe in Jesus, right? They believe in Jesus. Well, they believe in a person named Jesus, who they say is, right, gonna return and everything. And he was born to Mary, but not the Virgin Mary, right? He was born to a woman named Mary under a fig tree, and he's specifically not the Son of God. He did not die on a cross, and among other things, right, he's not divine. And when he comes back, he's supposed to deny his divinity. He's supposed to help kill all the Jews and Christians that are holdouts. So definitely not the same Jesus, right? Not our Jesus. So the answer to that is no, they don't believe in Jesus, not in the sense that anybody thinks that that's what it means. So in Islamic eschatology, right, last days prophecy, everything in their scriptures, their Quran, right, and the Hadith, right, everything there is got a correlation, again, because the Babylonian kingdoms were the antithesis to the House of Israel. Their Mahdi, or their Messiah, is the same person as the Christian Antichrist, and right, so on. So that, of course, Muhammad wasn't a prophet of God. Well, where did he get the information? Well, right, Satan was dictating this, so basically Satan's plans laid out there. There's just a couple of quotes I want to pull out of the Quran. There are many, many, many on violence and killing of unbelievers. It's important to note that there is no such thing as moderate Islam. Now, I'm sure that there are some peaceful Muslims, but Islam is not peaceful. The moderate Islam, the concept was cooked up in the 80s to convince the West that so that we would accept them and as being, a religion of peace. This came out during the Holy Land Foundation trial in the early 80s, right? The FBI big case where they got all this information, but because the United Nations protects Islam, not other religions, protects Islam, then this information, you can find reference to it, but they've taken all the information so you can't actually read it anymore. But that is where it talked about their plans on taking over the West. And in a future video we go into a lot more of these details of pieces of information on this world takeover and world domination that they have to do in order to go to their form of heaven. Now, in the book of Revelation, it specifically says, "And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for a witness of Jesus Christ," right, or a witness of Jesus, sorry, "and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast." Right, the beast again is Islam. Notice you can't even insult Islam. You have to worship the actual kingdom, not just Allah in that case, or you get beheaded. And specifically, Allahu Akbar, right? They say Allahu Akbar. It does not mean God is the greatest. It means Allah is the greatest. And Allah is the greatest, followed by He has no son, or you be beheaded. So it's a direct denial of Christ, or you get beheaded. So it fits in every detail. And again, not the United States. Nobody's beheading people in the United States, are not beheading people for not denying Christ, and the Pope is not either, right? This is the seventh kingdom. This is where the Antichrist will arise from. So we'll go into some more of this in detail in a future video. I hope that you feel like you've gotten something out of this, and if you feel like it was worthwhile, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.